The tape cut into her wrists as the trunk slammed shut. Darkness swallowed everything. Latima Carter could hear her own breathing, sharp and fast, echoing off the metal around her. The car engine roared to life, and the vibration beneath her back told her they were moving. She tried to pull her knees up, but her ankles were bound tight. Every bump in the road slammed her body against the side panels. She understood, in that suffocating space, that this was not a robbery, and it was not a misunderstanding. She had been taken. Earlier that evening in Albany, Georgia, Latima had been walking near her apartment complex when a man she recognized from the area approached her. He spoke casually at first, closing the distance with forced familiarity. Within moments, the tone shifted. He grabbed her, forced her into a vehicle, and overpowered her before she could escape. The attack was sudden and violent. He bound her hands and feet with duct tape and forced her into the trunk. There were no witnesses close enough to intervene, and by the time anyone realized she was gone, the car had already disappeared into the night. Inside the trunk, Latima fought to steady her breathing. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she focused on what she could control. The tape around her wrists was tight, but not perfectly sealed. She began twisting her hands slowly, ignoring the burn against her skin. She listened to the turns the car made, trying to memorize the pattern of movement, though the disorientation made it difficult to judge direction. Time stretched. The air felt thinner with each passing minute. Eventually, the vehicle slowed. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. The engine cut off. Latima heard a door open and close, then footsteps moving away from the car. Silence followed. She waited, unsure whether he was still nearby. When she heard the trunk pop open, she braced herself. He grabbed her and dragged her out. Night air hit her face, heavy and humid. She saw dark water reflecting faint light from the sky. They were at a lake. He carried her toward the edge. She struggled, but her limbs were restrained. Without warning, he threw her into the water. The shock of the impact stole her breath. She sank immediately, the weight of her bound limbs pulling her down. Water rushed into her nose and mouth as she instinctively tried to inhale. She forced herself to stay conscious. The tape around her wrists had loosened slightly during the ride. Beneath the surface, in complete darkness, she twisted her hands with everything she had left. The adhesive began to peel. She kicked hard, even though her ankles were still partially bound, fighting against the drag. Her fingers slipped free first. She tore at the tape around her legs as her lungs burned. Instinct told her she had seconds. When her legs finally broke loose, she kicked upward with everything she had. Her head burst through the surface, and she gulped air, coughing violently. She heard nothing from the shoreline, no footsteps, no shouting. The attacker had assumed she would drown. Latima kept moving. She swam away from where she had surfaced, putting distance between herself and the bank. Every stroke hurt. Her body felt heavy and disoriented, but she refused to stop. When her feet finally touched the bottom near a different stretch of shoreline, she dragged herself out of the water and collapsed onto the ground. She lay there for a moment, shaking uncontrollably. Then she forced herself up. The area was dark and unfamiliar. She began walking, still soaked and struggling to breathe evenly. Eventually, she reached a nearby residence and pounded on the door. When it opened, she told them she had been kidnapped and thrown into the lake. The residents called 911. Law enforcement responded quickly. Officers located the scene near the water and began searching for the suspect. Latima provided a description of the man and the vehicle. The investigation moved fast because she was alive to tell them exactly what had happened. Within days, authorities identified and arrested the suspect. He was charged with kidnapping and other related crimes stemming from the abduction and attempted murder. Medical personnel treated Latima for exposure, bruising, and the effects of near drowning. Physically, she would recover. The psychological aftermath was more complex. She had experienced confinement, assault, and the sensation of drowning, all within a single night. Yet her survival hinged on deliberate decisions made under extreme stress. She had controlled her breathing in the trunk. She had tested the tape instead of surrendering to panic. She had kept moving in the water even as her lungs burned. Investigators later stated that if she had not freed herself underwater, she would not have survived. The lake where she was thrown was deep enough to conceal a body quickly, especially at night. The attacker had relied on restraint and isolation to finish the crime. He miscalculated her will to fight. In court proceedings, prosecutors detailed how he targeted her, restrained her, and transported her against her will before attempting to drown her. The charges reflected both the kidnapping and the deliberate act of throwing a bound victim into open water. The case drew attention across Georgia because survival under those conditions was rare. Many victims in similar situations never had the opportunity to testify. Latima did testify. She described the darkness of the trunk, the sound of gravel near the lake, and the feeling of sinking with her hands taped together. Her account provided the clearest evidence of intent. The jury heard how she had managed to loosen the duct tape and break free underwater. Her voice in the courtroom carried the weight of someone who had been expected to die. The man who abducted her was convicted and sentenced under Georgia law. The outcome ensured he would not have another opportunity to repeat the crime. For Latima, the sentence did not erase the memory of that night, but it did close the legal chapter. Her survival became the defining fact of the case. Bound, transported, and thrown into deep water, she made a series of split-second decisions that kept her alive. She refused to let panic freeze her in the trunk. She refused to inhale water when she hit the lake. She refused to stop swimming when her body screamed for rest. What began as a calculated abduction ended as a failed attempt because the victim did not surrender to the circumstances designed to kill her. In the darkness beneath the surface, with no witness and no immediate rescue, Latima Carter freed herself and forced her way back to air. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.